I'm your host Petri, and this show helps you to build your company. We are on this journey together, sharing knowledge, experience, and learning from each other. In this episode, I talk with Slush CEO Miika Huttunen. Slush is a huge student volunteer movement that has been gaining momentum the last 10 years, from a very humble beginnings among a few students and an idea. The events were among the largest in the startup ecosystem, and I used to describe the late November event as a business disco. The atmosphere was unique. And this year, everything changed. The main event was cancelled early in the year, and Slush took drastic measures to adapt to the new reality. What's the future of business events, and how to accomplish your mission in this decade? That's what we are discussing in this episode. Hey Miika, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
You started earlier this year as CEO of Slush, and pretty soon you figured out that you have to let go 2/3 of your staff. How did that feel?
Well, that's quite a starter. Well, it obviously felt really bad. At Slush, we kind of work extremely closely together, and our friends, even outside, our friends outside the office and at the office, and spend a lot of time together. And obviously, it wasn't something that I was planning for the year. So I must say that didn't feel that good. But obviously, that made me realize, or that experience made me realize that once I was in the middle of the situation, that I knew that has to be done. Simply that we're not able to do our main product this year, and mainly a big part of the team was formed around that. My key learning from that was that you simply, as a CEO or as a leader, you have to kind of move towards the pain. There was moments when I wanted to kind of just forget what's happening, or kind of step aside. But as a CEO or as a leader, when you know that something evident is happening, you just have to walk towards the pain and kind of do the decision, even though it would feel quite bad.
You were preparing for the event, I would guess January, February as business as usual, and then world started to change. And you were among the first, if not the first, from the bigger event producers to cancel your show for this year. And that was a really brave move. 95% of your revenues were basically gone, and there was no sort of any insights what's going to happen in the future. I was really taken by that. And can you walk us through a bit? How did you come to that conclusion? You also mentioned in the press release that you say that because we don't know what's going to happen, it's kind of irresponsible from your side for the sponsors, for the attendees, and everyone involved. If there would be the case that later on you need to cancel it. So it's better to cancel it totally than just postpone it for a while.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it comes down to the question of what is actually brave and what is not. So I think the timeline, and I will explain that soon, the timeline was something like this. So as mentioned, we started the year with full speed with a team of roughly 35 people. And one really funny thing about that was that when we planned for the main team for this year, for this year's event, it was actually uncertainty. And at that point, we didn't actually know at all what will happen with the COVID. I had a call in January with our Slush China team CEO, Chen Wang, and Chen mentioned to me that there is something happening in the Wuhan. Basically, there is this virus ongoing, and people are encouraged to be in at their homes. But that didn't yet cause like a major reaction on business operations or any decision that I made. But it was something that I left thinking, and then pretty quickly when the virus spread to the Europe and to the Italy, for example, and later the US and other countries, we kind of like started doing like scenario work and calculations more in depth. We have done something before that. We knew that there is something worrying related to the virus, but only at that point when the virus actually spread to the Italy for the first time, we actually went super deep down on the calculations and on the scenarios and the options. And actually, what we first thought about was just what if we actually downscale the event? What if this virus causes that many of the international visitors and investors and startups are not interested to join Helsinki, but we're still able to pull the event with smaller scale? And more time we realized a couple things. First of all, we realized that many of the financial projections in different scenarios were kind of steering towards company betting strategy, which meant that that we would, if we cancel the event super late, we're kind of doomed. And then it comes kind of back to the question of bravery and what is actually courageous, and why we kind of like realized like why to bet against something that is not in our control by any means. So we kind of realized pretty fast that by canceling this event, we can still pull something off for this year, but also save time for our visitors and partners who are planning for the event, but at the same time be responsible and ensure that the Slush will continue in the future as well.
I think that was really good insight. What you were doing, I remember from the episode with Volt co-founder Elias Aalto, he said, "Don't bet the farm in any single venture." So this is basically the same thing. So it's better to survive than risk everything. So venturing anything with startups or any business is basically de-risking, so that you're not always putting all the eggs in the same basket.
It's really important to think every now and then, like, what is actually brave? Do you actually have to take this bet? What is the upside, but what is actually the downside? And in our case, it was, if we only talk about the financial perspective, sure, we would possibly have been able to do some kind of like decent financial year. That's totally obviously a question mark. But on the other side, there was, in case the event would be cancelled, that would basically threaten the whole future of the whole organization. So kind of from that perspective, and especially when I think about it now, it's totally evident that has to be done.
Was there a lot of discussion within the team, or was everyone pretty quickly in the side of let's cancel it and do something else, and sort of let's forget this thing and get over it and have a short grief period and then we just start to build new stuff?
Obviously, not everybody agreed. We started to talk about the option of not having the event at all before the layoffs that we have to do. And obviously the opinion around what we should do were pretty divided. There were thoughts about like having it as a smaller event, having it actually in different location and going even smaller. Obviously options for canceling it right away. And maybe to answer a question, it was really, really divided because we were in totally new situation. There were different opinions, like when actually the virus will be gone. Is it actually gone already by the summer? Is it gone by August, or is it actually gone next year? And it took some time to be able to explain kind of like what I mentioned earlier about this hedging these risks and ensuring the health of the good future for this organization, among many other things. So definitely not all agreed.
Now you have already started to have new services and basically build something for the next years as well. It's not just event for 2 days, but it's helping startup founders year round. What do you think of events? What is the future with business functions? A lot of the dynamics of a physical business event where you synchronously in the same time in the same place with people oftentimes traveling from abroad. If you take that physical aspect away, I think there's not that much left for the old model if you just copy paste it to the digital world. And you said you were doing scenario planning. Did you come to the conclusion that it's better to not just copy paste, but start to do something from a blank page and start to question everything and assume that something else needs to be done to fulfill your mission?
So I think there is like two sides for this. One is obviously what we did and what we're going to do this year in online world, and then there's the question about like how the world of offline events will change and how they possibly would merge together to this so-called hybrid model. For the online events and kind of like what we thought about was we did the layoffs. We started with the smaller team again, like kind of like rebooted in the mid-April, and we actually started to think about like what to do now. Once again, 95% of the revenue is gone, and the main product is not happening, but we still have time to execute something, and we know that founders need help. So obviously the first and most evident thing was first to think about like, can we replace Slush with online event? Maybe the same days going just to online. But nobody of us actually got really excited of the idea, because we don't think that it's most likely the best way to fail if you try to replicate how things are happening in offline to how things are happening in online, or how they should happen in order to replicate what's happening in the offline world. And we realized that people don't really want to sit in front of their computers for 12 hours to watch content, what you can basically watch whenever you want. And people would like to have maybe other options instead of like sitting 2 days straight in Zoom and doing matchmaking. And this is like this was basically a starting point to where we started to think like, how would the online option work? And what we also realized about the offline world that we kind of wanted to replicate to the online is that a lot of people come to conferences and Slush and other events for the reason that they want to get an access to some members in that event. It's kind of like 2-day window to get access to some people where you happen to bump to some kind of random investor or some speaker or just somebody, the serendipity. And how we can replicate that feeling to online was something we also started to think about when we eventually started building Node. And I think some of the core aspects of that is creating curated community where not everybody is able to join, but they have a common interest to do something. For investors, it's mainly to find something to invest and help. And for startups, it's to build and to discuss with these people. And when they have a vested interest, they have also vested interest to help each other. So these are some of the elements that we start to think about, like how we can actually put these to the product. And finally, the last part was, okay, so people don't want to watch content 12 hours straight. So how are we going to do this in our product? So we start to think about, like, okay, I think it's two ways to do it this in online. One is that you should have a lot of content of which you can choose, and it should be somehow special. So instead of doing it for 2 days, we're going to do it for the whole fall, and you can kind of like pick and choose when is a good time for you. And the second thing is that we want to make it special. In a way, we want to ensure that it's conversational. At Slush, at the offline event or at big conferences, you usually just sit like maybe 20 meters away from the speaker, and there is no contact. There is no like, it's really hard to get a grasp and even ask questions or be close to the speaker. And that's something we want to create in online world, so you can actually discuss with people who are helping or giving advice.
You did some customer service. You asked around with startups and VCs earlier this year that, okay, what are your pain points? What's happening? What do you think is going to happen? What do you need? What you just described, was that your hypothesis, or was that coming out of the process you were doing in discovering the new model?
Well, it was kind of like emergent process. Obviously, that what I mentioned earlier, it wasn't like the early hypothesis. It was something that it started from the fact that we were not excited of replicating Slush as a 2-day event to the 2-day online event.
So it felt sort of wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It started from the fact that nobody of us have been in 2-day event or in online event before that was good. That was the first thing, and the second thing was the like underlying energy of the team and excitement towards that idea. And from that moment, we started to like unbundle different dynamics, how we could do things, and started to build towards this. And while we were like unbundling how we could do this, we obviously discussed with many investors and startups what are their pain points, what they would like to maybe use, how they're currently using online in the midst of Corona, like where they get help, how they raise funding. And based on that, eventually came up Node in its current form. And we don't know how it will work. Will people like it? But there is something that we believe is kind of the future of how, in our focus area, how these things should be done. But I'm sure there is a lot of things to fix and fine tune. But it's a good start.
Can you describe the sales pitch? Because you've been doing cold sales earlier in your career, so you were calling investors and selling things, and the calls were 15 seconds to 2 minutes, so you have to really get to the point. So me as a startup founder, why should I join Node? Or me as an investor, what is the value for me?
It always starts from the fact that you have to know, or I would have to ask you, what is your current problem? Okay, if your problem, if I know that, as it's with most of early stage founders, they have roughly 6 months of runway. And when I know that, I will most likely point out that first before, and then describing Node. Node is a curated community for founders and founders only, where investors and ecosystem players also help you for the next stage. Basically, it's a place for you to meet different people to help you go from A to B, and after that to the C. And we want to ensure that you meet investors both by just simply sending messages to investors and arranging meetings, but also us helping you with warm introductions to some of the biggest and most prestigious investors in Europe. I think that's the pitch, and it comes down to the fact that we are, or we believe that we must do a lot of things that don't scale, and a lot of handwork to ensure that people actually meet each other at first before we actually understand the dynamics, how people work in this online environment.
Sounds like you're doing an MVP at this stage.
Exactly. It's well, my kind of belief, or how I see product development and creating new products is this mantra that everything is MVP always, or everything is work in progress always, kind of like that type of mentality. I think Jeff Bezos in Amazon says it, that it's day one mentality, but for me, it's like always work in progress.
What are your thoughts on community? You've been doing community building earlier in Vaasa Entrepreneurship Society. You also been a part of a assembly demo scene. So, and you do also avid gamer. So there's a lot of learnings and a lot of good stuff already happening for many years, if not decades, online and partly offline or as a hybrid model in different parts. And I think gaming is pretty good example of how can you connect and communicate and entertain yourself and be part of a society in a way without actually physically meeting.
I agree 100%. I think gaming is one of the most interesting like communities where you feel a sense of belonging, and kind of like you feel that you are part of this some kind of group, and you feel that people are really similar to you, although you have never met them. And it comes from the fact that it's passion for a lot of these people, and they share kind of same language, something that you cannot discuss with just somebody that you bump on the road or on the street. But you have your own way of communicating, and it's I think that's one of the beauties of gaming communities.
So is the Slush node now the new online business disco game? Open world.
Well, I don't hope that it's called that way, but I hope it's inclusive place for founders to find help and meet also each other.
How long do you think it takes that you become friends? It's the same thing. It's basically building trust.
Mm-hmm.
If you're meeting, you start a founder and you're meeting partners or you're meeting investors, you start talking to each other, you start to learn from each other, and it's not too far from dating basically. And then you get married if you get investment, using the metaphor till the end. Hopefully not divorcing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? Have you planned already the customer transformation or the user journey through Node?
Well, yes and no. I think there is a lot of still to be planned. Well, what we try to create with Node is that when you join the Node, you have always somebody you can ask help, and that's obviously we start with that. You can, if you're a founder, you can always send message to the Slush team and to the extended team of Slush who can like help you forward. But after that, we try to actually create and kind of like plan those social dynamics that you start to form connections inside of that community as well. But it's really difficult because you cannot force that. And I think the best way is well, based on my hypothesis, is to gather founders or people with some same topic, for example, same problem that they're currently trying to solve. Let's say you're trying to scale your organization from hiring perspective, or you are thinking about like when to hire your first chief people officer, or something even more difficult problems than that, and gather those people in a group and let them discuss and help each other, that's by far the best way to form connections and friendships and those. And that's something we are going to do a lot this fall.
Now I start to get what you were saying earlier before we went online, that you have this new hypothesis that curators are the new creators.
Yes,
So you're
absolutely.
building sub-communities or smaller groups with the interest. So it's like when you go to Twitch and you find that, okay, people are playing Fortnite or Call of Duty, same thing. You know, these are from the EdTech, these people are with FinTech, and they have this stage. So it's pretty much the same thing. There's more stuff you can learn from each other, and you have more fun, and obviously might be a bit competing as well, but you share so much in common.
Yes, 100%. I think Slush is mostly organization that curates information and people, and it's something we're pretty good at, in my opinion. And it's really interesting what you said. Like, curators are the new creators, because it's something that is also happening a lot currently in tech, especially, and in video games and in live streaming. Because the real scarcity is not like content anymore; it's attention, and obviously it's impossible to absorb everything from the massive flood of information. And the best what we can do is try to pick and choose what matters to us most. Where should I use time? Should I watch this video? Should I actually read this article? Should I actually have a lunch meeting with this person? But actually, the best, even beyond that, is to find people who can do creating for us. And you have probably seen a lot of these new newsletters like Substack coming up, where people create content for you. They find interesting things to read for you, or they write something for you based on many different things. And at Slush, we're doing exactly the same. We, at the offline event or in online world, we try to find the most interesting people during that year to help you forward with your company. They come to speak, they deliver information, they give advice, but they are also there to meet you. So in a way, we're doing creation all the time when building these online and offline products. Not just only in events, but also what we do with Soaked, for example, our own digital media. We have built really MVP resource bank to our website, where we aggregate the most interesting articles of different fields of building your company. Because you can save a lot of time when somebody have already read the article and they know that it's good and they recommend it to you. I'm much more willing to read it and use time.
I think there's quite many interesting trends happening here. One of them is just picking up what we discussed, deplatformization, if that's even a word. But seeing that Instagrams, Facebooks, and whatnots, they're not showing the content anymore. The content creators cannot be guaranteed to reach to the audience anymore by their means. And last year there was this celebrity thing called Community, where famous people give their phone numbers and you can text them directly. That was sort of a reaction, or at least a new way of trying to get to the audience directly without anyone else deciding who should get the message or not. And I think that's partly the thing as well with all the Substacks and all these content creators. They start to ask the question that why should I pay to reach my audience? It doesn't make any sense. So newsletter is pretty much one of the oldest technology means in digital world, where you are more or less guaranteed to reach everyone, and the list is in your control. It's just a text file with the addresses. You can take it with you.
Yeah, exactly. And there is like interesting ways of how these creators currently utilize their communities and how they actually even monetize them. Two ways I'm using, or how I'm like how I have purchased this new way of like curators monetizing their expertise is one. I have subscribed to the newsletter, who's written by Lenny Kravitsky. He talks about product management and different kind of like strategies, how to build your product and how to get users and how to manage growth. But when you subscribe to the newsletter, you're not on, instead of getting it only once a month to your mailbox, you get it every week with different topic, but also you get an invitation to his private Slack group. So there's roughly currently 400 subscribers in that private Slack group. And it's actually pretty interesting and exciting when, for example, if I read that article and I get question, like I'm thinking something, for example, related to Slush or related to something totally different, and I can actually ask that question from a person like Lenny, and usually he replies pretty quickly. And the second thing, how I'm using this is obviously live streaming and gaming. So in Twitch, you're able to subscribe to a certain streamer, or you're able to help them. You're able to donate them. And something that what I'm also doing with these people is that when they're not streaming publicly, like they're not online at Twitch, they might do like these community games or streams, where the streamer spends time with the people who have supported them or are part of their community, and that's really fun as well.
Many episodes back, I think might be the number 6, Ville Tolvanen was talking about community building, and obviously he's big in Finland in digital transformation, and he was saying, and that's the title of the episode as well, make your work visible. Mm-hmm. And he was also talking about really tiny niches, that you don't need to know everything. You can just be really good at something, and people will find you, and that's your way of becoming an expert. And you just show and do the work. And I think this is really what's happening. And it's really fascinating that you can now connect to the people who are on the top of their game. And it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. And that's really amazing, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agree. I think some of the most interesting articles around like this passion economy or these like curators or new creators type of things has been written by Lee Jin from Andreessen and Horowitz, different blog posts, and I'd recommend reading those for anybody who's interested.
You were also writing about esports and the future of esports. Could you just briefly explain what is esports and how big it is and what's the significance? Why should we spend any time in this podcast to talk about it?
I strongly believe that the future generations and even the current generations like myself will be using, not in 20 years, but actually in 5 to 10 years, significant proportion of their time watching other people play games, especially other people play games competitively.
Now I get it why it's called sports, spectator sports.
Exactly. So that's why I think we should talk about it. So esports in really short manner, how as I mentioned, is people playing against each other, video games, competitively. It started roughly 20 years ago with the games like Quake and Counter-Strike, and back then it was mostly something that these nerds like myself did in their homes or at LAN-parties in the local area network. But a lot of things happened around 2013 and 2014 when a game called League of Legends from Riot Games started to grow and get even more popular. And currently it's still fairly small part of gaming. If the gaming is worth over 160 billion esports is or the market of esports is only 1 billion at that point, or at this point, but it's growing really rapidly, and it's getting more and more attention from young people. People want to watch other play, people play themselves, and everything related to the esports is growing heavily.
That's becoming the regular sports in a sense that the younger generations are not looking the old way, the physical sports so much. It's basically the demographics of the old sports is getting older. The new people are just converting to the gaming. I think another fascinating thing about the gaming is that it's the same games you can play. Obviously, it's the same thing like football. You can still play football locally and with your friends, and you can relate easily.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe it's even more fascinating that you can do it electronically, and it could be you if you're just good enough, or you can just relate. And when you really in the sharing the moments, maybe it's even more personal, more intimate than just watching some football in a huge stadium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. And one of the reasons, or one of the really exciting parts of esports, and even how big that industry can actually grow, is that it's insanely accessible. And also what you mentioned, you can share the experiences in totally different way than in traditional sports. First of all, the accessibility, due to the fact that esports is digital only game or way of doing that, provides like unprecedented accessibility for that. You can be 150 centimeter tall or 2 meters. You are not judged by your physical ability, how well you can play the game, because only what you need is in-depth understanding of the game. You need internet access, quite decent PC, and then just a curiosity for doing that. So, and then of course, depending on the game, interest to develop yourself in similar fashion, like if you would be playing chess or some other similar games. So the accessibility for esports is amazing. So you don't have to buy maybe or use 500 euros or 1,000 euros for ice hockey equipment or different things. You every year you basically need 500 euros for PC, which you can use for 4 years, and then get access to games that are mostly free to play.
Finland has been having, is actually from the 80s, Assembly,
Mm-hmm.
the demo scene. I think that could be probably attributed partly to the success of Finnish companies and individuals in the global gaming scene. Good share of per capita gaming companies coming from Finland. So you've been part of that scene. Can you explain a bit to the people who maybe don't know Assembly? What's behind that and how it's been growing, and maybe is that the roots for the success of Finland in the gaming?
Yes. So Assembly is Finnish demo scene and gaming event. It started as totally only as a demo scene event on 1992. Demo scene is in short way, or in short explanation, a form of art what you can do on your computer. It combines computer graphics, music, and different parts of creating these real-time audiovisual art pieces. It's art of combining code, art, and music. And it started 92 as a small group of people who were really interested to do different things on your computers and learn from each other. And it actually grew pretty quickly. Already in the 90s, it was in Helsinki Jäähalli for several thousand people.
Ice hockey ring.
Ice hockey ring, exactly. And then later grew and grew to larger venues. And currently, it's held in the Helsinki Exhibition Center for roughly 8,000 people. annually. It has shifted a bit from the demo scene to the gaming side and to the esports, what we discussed earlier. And it kind of attracts people from 12 years old to 60 years old who share the common passion for games. And for example, what you can do at Assembly is to watch these demos in competitions where people, for example, they build new games and then they compete in game development competition. Or you can, there is a competition where you have to create a demo with Commodore 64, so this kind of like old school demo combo, or with Amiga, so these old computers. And then there's like esports tournaments. And to your question about has Assembly been core and one of the key reasons why there is so many successful gaming companies, and I think it has had a big impact. Finland and the Finnish programmers were like way ahead of many other countries in the 90s in computer graphics and many of these things, due to the fact that people enjoyed to do these demos on their free time. And for example, a lot of these people just did them for free and as a hobby. But when they realized that actually, wait a minute, can I get paid for this? And later, for example, in the 95, there were a lot of like companies formed that are still existing in the Finnish gaming scene, like Remedy Entertainment, or even earlier than that, there was Terramargu and Bloodhouse, which later merged into Housemark, which is still around after 25 years and currently creating quite an awesome looking game for PS5.
Can you name a few of their favorite games so that maybe people don't recognize the company names, but they may recognize the titles?
Absolutely. For example, Remedy has made, I think one of their like breakthrough game was Max Payne. Max Payne and Max Payne 2. And then later they have made like games like Alan Wake, and just recently a game called Control. That's one example of Remedy.
And there was also a few aspects. Basically, one of them was that early into computing, there was not too much of, there was a scarce resources. You really didn't have that much computing power. You didn't really have that much memory. So you really have to be inventive. You have to be almost like a genius, Steve Woz type, to get something amazing out of these tiny things. And then came the mobiles, and it was the same thing in the beginning. You had a tiny black and white screen, and there was basically no memory there either. That was, I think, the perfect scene for the jump from the art and hobby to the business world and get your warm game to the world. And then came obviously later on the PC.
Exactly.
There's been like almost 3 decades of history, and the scarcity is here, I think, one of the key things. You have to be creative when something is not in place.
It was all about like pushing your computer to the absolute limits at that point, like how we can actually pull the absolute maximum of the computer for this demo. And I think one of the most historic examples of that is a demo called Second Reality, which was published in 1993 by Future Crew. And a lot of its members are like really successful investors and entrepreneurs these days. And not just only entrepreneurs and investors, but also like musicians and many others.
And now we see actually the same thing happening in a different field related, obviously, augmented reality and VR. And for example, Finnish Varjo is pushing the edge now with the same thing. Once again, limited resources. We don't have enough computing power in an affordable means to do things we would like to get, photorealistic video or augmented reality. So it's still going on, and it's pretty much the same people as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of demo sceners in these companies, like bringing that history and that experience to these companies, and I think it's really beneficial that the demo scene community was so strong in the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000, and still there is like sub communities in Finland who are interested about demo scene, and I think assembly is really important event also for that purpose, that these people actually meet each other even once a year. Old school demo sceners come together and they discuss like how they're doing and what they have been doing lately, and I think talking about communities, assembly is an example of extremely important organization and event and community for exactly this purpose, because it brings people together who have been part of or are currently or want to be part of this art of doing something great with your computer.
And with great passion. And
exactly.
That was the thing when you started to describe assembly in the beginning. I was about to say, throw a joke there and say that, hey, are you actually talking about Slush? People starting and the same thing, passion to change the culture and do things. So I think this is pretty much how things get started. Few people get together, they start to do things, and they're really passionate what they do. It's not for the money, it's not for the monetization. They want to change something, they want to do something together, and then they just find each other, and more people are joining, and that's how many of the amazing things get started. A lot of work, a lot of passion, and then it's just in the right time, amazing stuff happens.
Exactly.
Why I'm so fascinated about games and this world is the thing that is also pushing the edge in technology-wise.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about gamers, the gaming computers obviously are quite powerful. If you're live streaming, the latency needs to be really short. If you're pushing it to the thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people at the same time, it has to work.
Mm-hmm.
And in games, you see that if the video quality is not good enough, you miss the action, and you don't really want to do that. Same thing with audio, same thing with chatting. If it's crappy, it doesn't work. So there's a lot of demand for high quality services. How do you scale the community, interaction, engagement? How do you keep the trolls away? How do you deal with spam? How do you monetize it? The same thing also with the creators, the gamers themselves who become stars. It's basically low entry barrier to come to the field. So how do you become a successful there? It's really competitive. And obviously P2C model. So I think there's a lot of things regular P2B businesses, startups can learn from the gaming and this world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like Ville Tolvanen was saying that he was looking the bands, rock bands, Metallica, how they actually changed their business model after LPs and cassettes and CDs. That model was basically killed, and they need to do some live events and touring and start to build communities around their fans and monetize that. And even between the tours, what are all the means you can engage with your community and build excitement and experiences together with people? And if that's not a community, what is? So I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in this decade. And we may not even need to meet physically at all.
Yeah, I think gaming and game development is there's a reason why it's like forerunner in many things, and why different industries seem to like replicate some of the things that gaming has done or the gaming community has done before. I think there's two reasons for that. One is that game development itself combines so many different expertise that you have to combine in order to create a great game. It combines like programming from graphics to server side. It combines mathematics. It combines art. It combines music, business, and marketing, and all of these
storytelling as well.
And storytelling, exactly.
Amazing, a storyline.
Exactly.
People hooked.
Exactly, and these like have to work together like beautifully. That's something that a lot of companies definitely get inspired from, and kind of like try to understand like how these organizations are built and how they work together and why actually they work together. And the second thing why I think game development and gaming is a good test bed for many things that we're going to see in the future from the other field as well is that the gaming community and the fans and the players are usually really interested to try new things. So you kind of get a lot of testers and people early on to try your product. These days it happens, for example, that if you're building a new game, you already since the day one start to build your community in Discord, where you can discuss with people and basically build the game together with them while they provide insights and different thoughts. So these two things allow like companies in gaming kind of like try new things, push the limits, but also get pretty quick iterations and understanding, like, are we actually doing the right thing currently?
I'm sure you've been discovering, evaluating a lot of different platforms for building communities, communicating with people. It doesn't need to be a community per se, but even just with your customers. Can you recommend something? For example, how could I reach people? How can I connect with hundreds or thousands of people? Obviously, there's Slack, there's Discord. There are different ways to do it. Even in the online platforms, there's like Hopin, obviously Zoom. But somehow I feel that all of these are lacking the things we really desire, or they have the downside as well. And it's not so vibrant in the long term. Getting back to those, always going to different places, and you need to have a compelling reason. You want to go there, you want to hang out, you want to do those things. It's after the initial excitement goes away, that's harder to achieve. So what are your thoughts? What do you think is working now? I've seen there's a lot of companies who are building things now, so asking this question maybe 1 year later, it's going to be completely different answers. But what are the good things to look at now?
Well, it kind of depends on how you are describing, like what exactly you want to find and what kind of communities you want to find. I agree with you that there is no, maybe if you don't take into account Clubhouse, that is currently like really.
Send me an invite.
Yeah, exactly. You have to get the invite, and there's a lot of FOMO for getting the invite, but that's like part of the story. A lot of these communities and these platforms work because not everybody is able to join there, and that's like the tough part of answering to your question. That if it's accessible for many, usually there are a lot of problems with that. Maybe a lot of like cluttered messages, and you're not knowing everybody, or you might share different kind of like thought or passions in that group. But I have been always maybe kind of like not answering straight to your question, but maybe answering maybe from the sidelines. I have been always really interested of like hanging around in the edges of the internet, and what that means is exactly being part of some really specific communities. And for me, how I find them is usually subreddits and Reddit itself. There are amazing communities on different topics. For example, now I'm recording this podcast in my own room, and I see around myself, like there is plants, and there is like a sewer machine, and there is a television, and for each of these things there is a subreddits where people who are extremely passionate about, let's say, plants, they discuss together. And usually through those subreddits, you find forums that are not like easily browsable from Google, or you cannot find them, or you find Discord channels, or you find Slack channels, or whatever they are. But I think the first thing what you have to do is kind of like understand what you're looking, and then just dig deep in the edges of the internet. That's a bit different answer to your question.
And another thing about building the community, if you are about to release your product, for example, and you need to gather the audience there and somehow raise the interest as well. I think one of the key learnings is as well that if you just open the floodgates, if you're in that lucky position that there's a lot of people queuing and waiting for, that may not be the best approach in the long term. In order for the community to grow and have a culture and values, you need to have a limited amount of people there first to define that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably something I think is important if you want to do this in the long term as well. And was that the reason you also been limiting in Slush now in your node, the amount of people you want to get in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, there is maybe two reasons for that. The first one is that we want to ensure that the amount of people we let in is an amount that we can actually create and help ourselves. If it's kind of like explodes right away to 10,000 or 15,000 or 30,000, it dilutes the community in a way that it's really hard to understand who are here, what they're wanting. There are a lot of people who are looking for different things. So we kind of like want to start with smaller number and then scale the community after we like on different stages when we realize that we can actually help these people. And at the second thing, kind of what is different to the offline version of Slush is that in offline event, you have been able to buy the ticket for the event without applying. If you have been buying pass as a like attendee, which is a category for our tickets, and not just as a startup or event or investor or media. But for Node, it's a bit different now because we have only tickets that has to be applied. It's for startups, investors, and like a access type what we call ecosystem which is for mainly like accelerators and people working with startups and helping startups, but who are not investors. So that kind of like pretty naturally also limits how many people we're getting and how many people are applying. But yes, we want to ensure that the community size is manageable and it doesn't feel like a huge mess right away. Because I see a lot of those for example, at LinkedIn currently. Personally, I use LinkedIn daily. It's just basically the place to find people who are not just only in this ecosystem, like kind of see like really quickly like what they're doing. But other than that, I think LinkedIn is absolutely garbage. And one of the reasons for that is that I get maybe 10 to 15 messages from people who I don't know, who want to sell, and mostly they are bots. And that's something we absolutely want to avoid when building Node.
And this reminds me of something I think which is emerging. It was actually Preston Byrne in just a few episodes back where he was talking about how junior lawyers don't have a career path anymore because AI, machine learning algorithms are getting so good that the work they've been doing is not needed anymore. And I think that is happening pretty quickly with the content as well. If you can push out good content, decent content, whether it's a blog post, whether it's whatever, LinkedIn invites, even with personalized messages that, hey, I really like your comment on this, or in your blog post you mentioned this and that. That's all bot. And I think that's coming quickly as well. Maybe this is the last moments to really reach the people directly, because it's the same thing what happened with regular telephone calls, those spammers calling, telemarketers, and it's just like, I don't want to pick up the phone. There's no one there I want to speak to. And it was just basically impossible to get through to people. So this is now happening, I think, to the last of the means, and it's coming quicker than probably expected.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we're trying to crack with the product that we're building, like how to ensure like real human connection and actually valuable people to meet, and ensure that if you join for a session or you consume content, it's already consumed by somebody else instead of like just tossing it to yourself in front of you and hoping that it's valuable.
What makes you happy?
What makes me happy is having high ambition interesting thing to do daily and being with my girlfriend.
How do you define success?
Success, that's a really good question. I think success is something when you feel a sense of fulfillment inside of yourself.
What are the things you're struggling with?
Well, I struggle a lot with managing time.
Is it just peculiar to this year and sort of compressed post-corona syndrome of new world, new levels, open world game? You don't know the rules, the controllers are a bit, off. You don't really know what's going to happen.
I think it comes from the fact that I don't know what's going to happen, and I try to find different sources, pieces of information, discuss with people to understand what's happening. But as nobody of us know what will happen in next month or in 3 months, it's a big adventure, and you can use as much as time you ever want. So the struggle with time comes from the fact that at some point I just have to put a stop, and it's time to stop thinking and do something else. And that makes managing the time currently difficult.
I read somewhere that one of the reasons computer games are so successful is that you feel some sense of fulfillment and control, because you can, learn the game, try again, and then you can succeed. So it's kind of a world where you are in control versus the real world open world game where, like you described, we don't really know what's going to happen. There's no easy ways to read walkthroughs that do this and it's going to work. Nobody knows the playbook. You have to figure it out yourself, and you can write about it, and then it's already changed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just but I think that's part of the fun. It's just, the experience we're having.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite word?
Demo.
What is your least favorite word?
I would say that's mediocre.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Nights and trance music.
What turns you off?
Hunger.
What is your favorite curse word?
Curse word. I think nothing in English, but in Finnish, sorry for my language, it's maybe like voi vittu, which is roughly translated to oh fuck.
What sound or noise do you love?
My girlfriend's laughter.
What sound or noise do you hate?
My phone notification sounds.
You can take them off.
I know.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to try to be an esports athlete.
What profession would you not like to do?
I'm not that good at crafts. And although I would like to try many of those things, I don't believe that I would enjoy specifically that anything that requires really, really specific hand-eye coordination.
If you could be a co-founder of any startup in any era, which one would you choose?
Well, this is not maybe too surprising, but I would maybe choose either the present moment or early 2000 and computer graphics.
Any particular company or just in the field?
Maybe just in the field, or then hybrid graphics or early days of NVIDIA.
Related question to the alternative career. Is there actually upper limit? Is it reaction time or something? Can you still in your 50s, 60s or 70s become an esports athlete?
Honestly, I don't know. Nobody have tried before. It seems that there is a trend that after like maybe 27 or 28, there is a lot of esports athletes that are retiring, and they are not maybe performing at the level that they used to be. I think the optimal age, especially from the reaction time perspective, seems to be like early 20s. But I think the data might be a bit skewed in a way that many of these players also want to try something else in their life when they're getting closer to 30s or early 30s. But I don't know. I would love to try it out.
And I think there's also different types of games. Not all of them require fast reactions in that sense that you need to shoot someone to do something like that.
Yeah. It's like, well, in FPS games, it's a lot of the reaction time. In these MOBA games like League of Legends, it's also reactions, but it's also the intelligence inside of the game and the tactics. And then there are, of course, games like Hearthstone, which is this like turn-based card game, where it's most like chess. You just have to think about like what the opponent is probably doing, what are my cards, what I can do. So obviously there is games that are also suitable for those that the best days of your reaction time might be already gone. So it's time to maybe then turn to the card games.
Any final words for the audience?
If you are ever interested to learn about what the hell is esports and how it works, who are there, what companies are included, why people seems to be interested about it, send me a message in Twitter or email or whatever. You will find me. Happy to provide insights.
And there was also an excellent Medium article you wrote earlier this year.
Yeah, there is a Medium article about like underlying drivers for why I believe esports will grow massively in the next 10 years, written to the Maki VC blog. That's a good starter.
Thank you, Miika.
Thank you, Petri. Thank you for inviting me. It was really fun.
Thank you for listening. You can find full episode notes and transcripts at talkswithpetri.com. How can I help you to build your company? Send me an email, tweet, or leave a comment on my social media posts. You can find them in Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, even in YouTube. If you like the show, send the show link to a friend of yours. I appreciate your help. Until next time.